Hello, this is Brian Chin, and in today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about how to refine a strain for shape and color, and I'm choosing a particular green strain that I'm developing. So the first thing I do is I try to define the goals that I want in this particular line, and since this line was from an outcross about 3 generations ago, it still needs a lot of refinement. And the things that really needs help is in the overall shape and conformation. So that would be the priority. And then the second priority is for color. And for this particular line, having a medium size body is okay. I do have other lines that I do breed for size, but in this particular line, I think medium size is good and just to work on shape and conformation and color. And the process I go through on choosing breeders is first I gather all the males or females in a small container so I can look at them closely. And then I sort out the obvious poor fish, and then from there on refine the sort, keeping my goals in mind. Now here it shows on my females, I gathered them all in one container, and then these are the females I sorted out, and these are the females I'm looking at that have good possibilities to be breeders. Now in this particular line, or in green guppies in general, I look for females that have color in the tail and the dorsal because this is a good indication of her genetics, and it's a good way to pass on these characteristics also to her sons. And I use a dark background and angled light. Now the dark background helps expose the color better, and the angled light brings out the green color in the females. Top lighting tends to make everything look blue, and it doesn't show off the yellow color in the background. It's showing through the blue to make green. And keep in mind that color intensity and spread will change with time. As the guppy matures, it expands and looks more even. So the best thing I can do is to pick indications of the color since they're only about 4 months old. So let's take a look at this one female. And as I've mentioned before in previous videos, green is a combination of blue iridophores and yellow. And here you can see the stronger blue iridophores here, and you can see the yellow that's much stronger here in the center of the tail. And though it's not really apparent in this photograph, there is some yellow and some blue in the dorsal. And this is so important because if you ignore this, you'll start having males with dorsals that do not match the color of the tail. And as you can see here, this particular female has no blue or yellow to make green colors in her dorsal, even though it does have blue here and yellow in the tail. And the danger of this is, like I mentioned before, your sons may not have the blue and yellow in its dorsals also to make it green so it matches the tail. And often when this happens, you'll get these males with maybe nice green tails, but their dorsals tend to be gray or black. So after picking color, I go on to picking shape in the females. And what I look for on the body shape is to have deep bodies and thick peduncles. The tail shape should have a good angle and straight upper and lower rays. Also, I use a light background with an angled light, and the light background helps you expose the shape of the female. Now, in this female that I wouldn't choose, you can see that our peduncle here is very thin and looks very kind of too long also. And it could be it looks too long because it isn't very thick. Now this female, you can see the severe dip in the head. So you need to not use females like this because she will pass this shape on to her sons. Now this female I wouldn't pick is because the angle here is too narrow, and of course the peduncle is thin too. And this kind of shape of tail is great if you're breeding for veil type guppies, but in this particular line I am looking to breed for delta guppies with a 60-degree angle. This angle here is closer to a 45-degree type angle, and also the chest could be a little deeper on this female. Now this female is pretty good. She has a good thick peduncle. Her angle of her tail is good. It's straight, not curved. And she has pretty good light black color distribution throughout the tail. And what this does is that it helps your males have even coloring. And as the female matures, you'll find out that the coloring of the tail will become more even. It'll appear also to be more solid in color. This female, of course, has good peduncle, good body shape. But the main thing is that what I really like about her is that she has this straight tail edge, which is really nice to have. Now with this female, I initially saw it as a borderline female, but then eventually a poor female. And this is the reason why. The main thing why I was first looking at was the tail shape. It seemed kind of rounded, and then the bottom ray is very rounded also. And then the color, it showed some strong variegation. It's not a big deal because most of my females show some variegation, and as the female ages, the color tends to even out. The thing that really did it to me is then I noticed this dip in the dorsal. It's not a straight line, it's slightly dipped. And you'll see later on when I talk about the males, you could see some males that also have this dip. So it's not good to choose females like this for breeding. Is another borderline female. Though everything's great about her. I mean, nice body and everything. Angle looks good. Straight here. But it has this big convex type curve in the tail. It's really extreme. And the problem with this is this kind of female will pass on a rounded type tail in her sons. So you'll get these males with a big bulge just like this in their tail also. This female, though, she has a nice straight edge. She's a borderline female because the black here is just very dark. And with the black background, it's even darker. And what this does is, it's great maybe if you have for a blue line, but too much black tends to block out the yellow here. And so your green males tend to look more blue than green. Again, maybe a great fish, since she has excellent body shape here, to pass on maybe this body shape to another line of fish that you can select for. Maybe if you have a blue line, she would be a good female that you can use to maybe start a second line and then you refine for color. So let's go on to choosing the males. As you can see here, I've gathered all the males together in one container, and then what I'll do is sort out the obvious ones that have faults that I don't want to use for breeding, and then refine the selection after that. So let's look at some of the examples of what I see as a poor fish or a good fish to use for breeding. So in this male, I considered it a poor male, and the reason is the angle of the tail is too narrow for me. It's borderline. It's kind of in between a veil and a delta, but I would not pick a male like this for breeding. And also it has the addition of a thin peduncle, so it's definitely out. And I was able to capture this photo, two males together, and you can see the difference. This male has a good thick peduncle, and this male has a thin peduncle. So visually, when you see them all together, you could really tell the difference. So here's a poor male here. And remember that female I showed you with that slight dip in her dorsal shape? Well, here's the male version here. And you can see in this male it's a little bit more severe. So I could not use a male like this because he'll definitely pass this on to his sons. And here's the same male, and it kind of shows it a little bit better. Now with this male, his dorsal is not the correct shape for the standard I'm breeding for. And the IFGA standard that I'm breeding this fish for asks for a parallel type dorsal, and this dorsal is just too rounded and it comes to a point. Now, if you're breeding for maybe a round balloon type dorsal, this kind of dorsal will probably end up being more balloon shaped. You know, this will grow out and this will come out like this, so it'll look more like a balloon shape. But not a male I would use. Also, his bottom rays seems way too, the corners of this male seems too rounded for me. This male, his dorsal fault is that it's scalloped like this. And I've tried to raise males like this up, hoping that it would smooth out, but it doesn't. It just gets worse. This is a borderline male. And as I mentioned before, the tail color here looks uneven, but I found out in green and blue strains, this isn't that severe. And with time, usually the color will even out. And so these light marks, as the black increases, gets evened out or darkened. This tail angle is good on this fish. And peduncle looks pretty good, but his dorsal shape is suspect. And I'm pretty sure when I saw this male swimming around, it was kind of more rounded like the previous male. Now with this male, this is a pretty good male. Now his dorsal may seem to slant here, but when it was fully extended, it was more of a straight parallelogram. The color, the good yellow, you can see in the center here developing, and you see the blue iridophores here. And what I like about this fish is that the tail is already starting to look pretty even in color. The iridescence is pretty even, and hopefully this yellow will increase and make the fish look more green. Excellent body shape here, and the peduncle looks nice and thick. This particular male is pretty good. I like him because his tail's light, and what this does is when the tail's lighter, less black overall, the yellow tends to shine, or it can be seen more. So it makes the fish look more green. Body shape's pretty good. The only thing I was a little worried about was his dorsal. It's a little bit thin, but it does show that parallelogram here. But I was able to catch another photo of this male, and you can see it's extended out completely, and it pretty good thickness, and it shows that nice parallelogram shape that's desired for the IFGA standard. Now this male is fairly good, and I use him for breeding. His tail shape could be a little better, but in this photo too, it doesn't quite show its actual shape. It's not bad, but I wish it could be a little wider. Good yellow color in the center to bring out the green in the tail. And one thing I like about this male is his excellent body shape. Nice and deep and thick peduncle. His dorsal shape is good too. Now, so as you can see in my breeding, there's always some little slight faults in even the males that I consider to be good. So it's all about compromise. So you pick the best males and females that you can in your group. And as you combine the better genetics, the number of good fish increases with each generation. And with time, you may get fish that has no faults at all, which is great. But because genetics is so complicated and the combinations of genetics you need to make the perfect fish, often you'll get a distribution of fish that may have some small faults, but you pick the best that you can for your breeding and your next generations. So in this particular line, as I get the shape more consistent, I will focus even more on the green color. And then, because if I get the shape consistent throughout, then I can just select for color purely. If you're interested in learning more about breeding show guppies, I do have a book out that's available on Amazon. And I also have another book that's a little bit deeper, and it talks about genetics. And it's also on Amazon. If you have a chance, you can look at my website. I talk a little bit more about my books. It has a lot of guppy show photos and informative articles you can read. And also, if you can, please subscribe to this YouTube channel.